Chris is with venture partner with he's a venture partner with Tall Grass Ventures. I've known Chris for a very long time, and he really knows his stuff, so you'll really enjoy his presentation. Chris has been involved with agronomy and agribusiness across North America for over 25 years, and the past 10 years has been directly involved in the development of new business applications and value streams around digitization of the farm, agribusiness, and agri-food. Chris's favorite area of focus is where technology meets strategy. Please welcome Chris to the stage, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Andrew. And, oh yeah, there we are. So, times they are a-changin'. That's what was in Bob Dylan's mind when he wrote that song in 1964. And I think it was in the minds of the whole population at that time because it became a big hit. People resonated with it. So I think the pace of change that Bob Dylan was viewing when he thought about that song would be considered slow in today's world and in any aspect of our lives. So it becomes on, and we've got things like the generational shift as the baby boomers decide to slow down and start exiting the workforce. We've got geopolitical events, we've got technology shifts, we've got all sorts of different types of disruptions that are creating these changes. So I think you can turn those changes into opportunities. I've recently made a big change this year. I decided to leave the corporate world and try some new things. I'm a partner in Tall Grass Ventures. I'll tell you more about that in a bit here, but I like where I've landed in terms of how it's responding to the changes that are all around us. So with those changes, there's some challenges that come with changes always. So one of the things I learned when I was working with a couple of global companies and getting a bit of a global perspective is that the challenges that farms have around the world are not that much different. The core challenges of a farm in China or in South America or in Western Canada are often very similar. So I don't know how big that font is if you can see it, but the changing regulatory environment is a big challenge for farmers all around the world. In Western Canada here, you know, all of a sudden, poof, neonics are gone, and there's been a few of those things that have all of a sudden popped up without any too much warning, right? So how do you manage around that? If you think about the future, there's, you know, fertilizer emissions is a big target right now. That could be a looming threat in the regulatory environment. It could be the way we spray. It could be a lot of the things like that. So labor shortage is a critical one. So again, if you're in the middle of China, that's still a big challenge. If you're smallholder farmer in India, that's a big challenge right now. If you're a strawberry farmer in California, it's a massive challenge. And it's no different in middle of Saskatchewan. It's going to be a challenge even more so going forward. Volatility in weather and climate change, that's not a new one for any farmer, but it's potentially getting worse. There used to be a glacier sitting right here. You know, as that glacier's continuing to recede, our weather's going to continue to change. So how do you manage around that? That's a big challenge, and it can mean a great year or a terrible year. So despite the best planning and efforts. So rural abandonment, urban sprawl, those are kind of opposites, but in terms of rural abandonment, like disappearing workforce, disappearing services in your local community, and even just the you know, the social life and the mental health impact of that. So that's a big thing. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, the urban sprawl, if you're within proximity of a big city, trying to go about your job and chase your cows down the road or spray that field becomes a big challenge all of a sudden. And that's no different anywhere in the world. So societal acceptance of technology. So I'm sure you're all familiar with that one, but whether it's the beef industry or whether it's anti-GMO or hormones or antibiotics, there's just a lot of different targets right now that are tools in your toolbox that the consumer may not want to know about, or if they do know about it, they may not want to participate in it. So that's going to be a big challenge to navigate around. How do you continue to grow your yields and do your job while the number of tools in your toolbox is being taken away? So upstream, downstream price volatility and inflation. So that could be the price of your John Deere tractor or your Ford truck. It could be the cost of your fertilizer, the cost of your weed spray. It could be downstream, what's going on with the price of canola and the margins that you can make off that. There's lots of volatility there, and how do you manage around that? That's a big challenge right now. Some of the tools that have been used to manage are no longer there and working as well. So how do you manage around such steep inflation right now? And maybe you can't even, maybe inflation is the best case scenario. You may not even be able to source that tractor or that ton of fertilizer. So that leads into the next one, is the unreliable storage and transport. So that's just been a huge challenge that was actually there long before COVID, getting worse and worse all the time. COVID really kind of exposed it and made it worse in a big hurry, but it's not going away. Changing consumption patterns. I just came back from California and was looking at the cultured meat opportunities down there, and it's just crazy. That's where a whole bunch of society wants to go, and there's a whole nother part of society that said, I'm not touching that. So it's gonna, whether you're gluten intolerant or whether you're anti-GMO or whatever, there's lots of consumer preferences that are going to be driving the way that we farm in this country. So rapid farm consolidation is one, again, all over the world it's happening, and how do you scale up? The way that you manage an 800 acre farm or a 2,000 acre farm or an 8,000 acre farm or on to 20,000 acres requires very different skill sets. You might not be good at those new skill sets, or maybe that's what you were born to do, but anyways, that is a challenge for agribusiness to try and adapt to serving those kind of farms, and it's a challenge for the farms to grow it into that. So with those challenges come opportunities. With all of them, if you can turn that lemon into lemonade, then you've come up with something better than you had before. So a lot of these on here on this list are not new, but there's newly emerging opportunities within them. So emission reduction credits, I can remember Rob Syke, since about 2004, talking about the emerging carbon credits market. And I don't think he was off. He might have been way ahead of his time. But this is one that's still coming. I think the carbon credits market is here more than ever, and it's about to get way more significant. So pay attention to that. That's a good opportunity for anybody in agriculture. As companies need emission reduction credits, they're moving into their what's called Scope 3 compliance, so total upstream and downstream emissions accounting for the total life cycle of whatever they build. And they need help to meet those targets. And what happens on a farm in terms of the crop inputs being used and the grain being sold has a big emissions footprint that can either be used against you or to help somebody meet their emissions target. So study that, learn it. That's an opportunity for anybody in agriculture, and I think we have a great story to be told there. Identity preserved premium price production contracts, that's not a new concept, but there's lots of new things emerging around that. High value niche crops, I was just at an event in Banff, and it was lupin was the new one I heard there. I don't think it's a new crop, but it's a new company promoting it, and that's just another example. There's lots of these things which could be, I talked to a farmer that was growing peppercorns, and he harvested a bright blue and a bright green peppercorn when he was on a swamp tour in Florida, turned that into a business. He now, you see them on the tables at restaurants, the fancy uncracked pepper that's got different colors in it. That was a farmer who was bright enough to grab a couple seeds and just start replicating that. So tourism, hunting, camping. Oh, sorry, I forgot vertical integration. Vertical integration is something, again, the concept is not new, but there's lots of new opportunities around that. Lots of ways to start to reach farther down the value chain and further process stuff right on a farm, or be involved in a local cooperative type of a processor. Lots of new stuff emerging. Tourism, hunting, camping. There's a guy I know in Montana that's built a digital platform where a land investor can start to further monetize their land investment by starting to sell the hunting rights. And there's, marketplaces where hunters will go and bid on the rights to hunt pieces of land. Could be alternative energy on that land. It could be the right to go camping on that land, and they get a little like an Airbnb type fee. So that's just one that caught my eye, that I thought that's kind of neat for the future of what you can do with the payback on farmland. Alternative energy and spin-offs, there's lots of stuff around putting up a windmill or a solar farm, or it could be something more along the lines of a biodiesel plant or methane. So lots of good stuff going on there. The bottom two are the ones I really want to drill down into. R&D farms. So there's a lot of agronomists in this room, and there's some really good farmers in this room. Everybody that's either one of those can participate in that. There's, in the world I live in, a lot of startups that don't actually know a real farmer, or if they do, not the right type of farmer. They're looking to how can I validate my technology to see if my idea is a good one. How can I prove it to the world that it's good? They need a real farmer or a real agronomist or a agribusiness, a retailer or somebody to endorse that, yeah, I've tested this, I've seen it work, and that's really hard for them to find. And that's an opportunity. So whether you're a farmer or an agronomist, if you can link up with that startup community and say, hey, I've got some new gizmo or some new algorithm or some new drone sensor or whatever it is, and I need to figure out how to do that, that's an opportunity. So for them, for this matchmaking process to happen, you got to put yourself out there a bit. You got to come to events like this, circulate, talk to these guys and say, how are you validating your technology, and could I help you? Could I play a role in that? And it doesn't have to be missionary work all the time. A lot of it is missionary work. It's farms or agronomists just trying to stay on the leading edge. They want earlier insight to turn that into a competitive advantage. But in many cases, it doesn't have to be free. It can be, hey, I want some shares, or there's maybe some, I want a few years of free access to this technology once it's gone commercial. There's all sorts of little deals that can be made. So I'm just trying to set my timer here. Good. The bottom one is tech entrepreneur. There's probably nobody in this room right now that can't become a startup. So the way that R&D used to happen, not even very many years ago, was the big corporates had lots of scientists, huge labs, huge budgets, engineers, patent attorneys. They had an amazing stack of resources to be innovators and to further build their technology out and protect the moat around it. So I've seen these big R&D initiatives in action. Like I was one in Germany that was mind-boggling. I was just stunned when I saw the depth of stuff that was happening there and how efficient it was and everything. But that is not the direction that it's going. There's a different type of innovation that is actually replacing that style of innovation. So a lot of the innovation now is coming from startups. And that's a global trend, and it's a very powerful trend. And big companies right now are realizing that. And it's good. It's a good win-win, because they can wait to see technologies take off, see if that's going to actually work or not, and then just buy into it, invest into it, and maybe ultimately acquire it. So that's replacing the traditional style of how big companies are innovation. So just not a decade ago, we were trying to raise capital. And that was a really hard thing to do. In fact, we didn't even know that we should be doing that. It was traditional, like, go to the local banker and try and get a line of credit. That was tough to do as a consulting company with a digital platform. There was no bricks and mortar equity that any normal bank would want to finance. So how do you raise capital? Well, in today's world, that would be a very different thing to do. It would be actually very scripted on how to do that, and we'd have very good odds of doing that. So, so the Canadian agri-food tech innovation ecosystem has changed a lot very rapidly. So if we go through this little wheel chart here, I'll start at the bottom left, but like a lot of the companies, big global companies, whether they're machinery companies or fertilizer companies or crop input companies or grain companies or food processing companies, food retailers, they all have corporate open innovation platforms emerging. A lot of them do. They also have corporate venture arms that will invest in early stage technologies. So that's not a totally new thing, but it's becoming the standard for most big companies now. We have many service providers, and by a service provider, like think of, say, a law firm that says, I want to work with this company in really early stages, so I'll give them a super sweet deal because I know they don't have much resources right now. And then when they do grow up to be a great company, we'll be their law firm. Could be an accounting firm, whatever, but there's a lot of those kind of service providers. Even the big IT companies are playing in that, where they'll give you a sweet deal on, you know, cloud access or data management services as a startup. They'll give you a preferred rate and lots of perks in hopes that you'll be there when you're a big company. So online resources, so business in a box. A lot of the contracts, a lot of the negotiating tactics, all that stuff you can access online now. That stuff wasn't there just a few years ago. You don't have to pay a lawyer to get a lot of these legal templates that you need to incorporate, to do a partnership agreement, to do a vendor agreement. This stuff is widely available now, and it's good quality stuff. Mentor organizations. So I'm part of a group called Creative Destruction out of Calgary, world-class organization, and it's got a lot of retired or active or semi-retired business people, a wide group of skills that includes a lot of scientists, a lot of retired executives, and they're available free of charge to the startups. So you got to apply. You got to have a decent business vision, and you got to have made some progress. But if you're motivated and you got a good idea, there's mentorship there. It might not be through creative destruction. There's lots of people who are retiring right now who don't want to just be put out to pasture. They want to keep the ideas flowing, stay active. So those are people you can approach and get some really good mentorship in an area that you might not be. Maybe you are familiar with a certain part of the agri-food stream, but not the whole thing. So venture builders. So what that means is there's a fund that has some money, and they've got an idea that this would be, you know, a good product, and they'll hire in people to go and become the founders, and you become a shareholder on day one, and off you go, and you got resources behind you to help build that. So it doesn't all have to be on your own dime or your friends or your family. So that's what venture build. We have those in our like Carrot is an example of one. There's about 4 of them in Calgary that I know of right now that are into that. You come to them with a good idea, they'll help you along. Incubators, very similar. Tech accelerators, so there's Cultivator in Regina, there's Plug and Play, there's Techstars, there's Thrive. These are all examples of tech accelerators that work in the agri-food space. And they do a good job of nurturing, training, providing you with connections to capital, connections to customers. So those are resources that can really help somebody, you know, start to go from that napkin sketch into an actual business to a really successful business. And you know, a little long later, there's angel investors now. So I'm in Calgary. There's a whole bunch of retired oil executives there that got a 10 or 20 million handshake on the way out the door. They think investing into agri-food looks really sexy, but they don't know exactly how to do that. But a pretty compelling presentation to them, they'll invest some money in a good idea. And Some of them have great experience they can lend to it as well, even though they're not from that. But there's many types of angel investors, and there's angel networks now. So these are getting a little more polished, where there's might be 300 angels that come together and they look at each other's ideas. And the cost to getting involved in those is very low. Like you can invest like, I think the one I heard from recently was $5,000. And then you get to see all the deal flow, and you get to network with all these other angel investors and talk about the war stories, what went right, what went wrong, what were some of the deals they've been looking at. So that's a resource for anybody that wants to start a company right now. Crowdfunding platforms is just, it's not a new idea, but it's just starting to emerge in this space where there's people who want to invest in agri-food that can tap these crowdsourcing platforms and get access to capital. The VC early in growth stage, so that's what I'm involved with now with Tallgrass Ventures. So we invest very early, usually pre-seed or seed stage. So that means that you probably haven't figured out your revenue model yet. You probably do have a product that you can show and tell. You probably do have a couple examples of, I know it's true because I've proven it here. That's what the seed stage is. As you know, our role in that would, as Tallgrass, would be we'll invest some money. Typically, the range would be from 100,000 to 600,000 or 700,000, somewhere in that range, depending on how far along it is. We've managed to raise $10 million already, just in the city of Calgary primarily. We do have a lot of farmers involved as investors, and we intend to use those farmers to be the advisors for these companies we've invested in, and they can help validate the technology, and they can be the early market access. If they like what they've tested and it's working well, it's solving a problem on their farm, now that's a big challenge for the startup, is how do I get my first few customers? Well, that solves that problem. So that's why we've really focused on getting farmers and agribusinesses as our investors, and now we go and invest in the startups and help nurture them. And that's our job, is to try and help them be more strategic. We connect them to resources, we connect them to more capital, and we try to get them to the next level as fast as possible. So there's all sorts of different type of investment funds. That's probably my biggest learning, is how specific the investors are searching for something that's totally unique. So I haven't yet met two types of investors that are looking for the same kind of thing. So we get a lot of companies approaching us, do you want to invest in us? Well, it could be, but we got a template that's about that wide, that is stuff that we know about, stuff we know we can really assist with, that matches the network of people that we know, the type of companies that we know. So and we're no different. Every investment fund has some kind of specific thing they're looking for. So it's not just the, what do you call it, the Monte Carlo approach, where you spread all your chips on the roulette table and hope one hits. It's a little more strategic than that. So that's why there's this filtering template. There's lots of pitch day challenges. I just came back from one. I pitched a company down in Silicon Valley, and it was a great experience. There's probably 2,000 people in the audience. And you know, it did its job well. We got lots of global companies approaching immediately after. So all these things are stuff that wasn't there 10 years ago. Lots of grants. We've got Protein Innovations and Kane and ARDAR and STDC, and there's Alberta. There's lots of resources now that weren't there very many years ago. So, and the purpose of those resources is to become a funding partner. They generally want to line up against somebody who's an actual investor and maybe a corporate. So they want to see, it's become called a supercluster, but they, a coalition of different types of investors that all want to make this company successful. So the academia institutions are playing a big role. They've all realized, hey, this is a big trend. They've got entrepreneurship training and things like the Olds College Smart Farm and the Vermilion Smart Farm, and it's now turned into a pan-Canadian Smart Farm network. That's a big resource. The hyperlayer is, I think I heard Andrew talking earlier about all the different data layers that should come together. That's what's happening. So you can have your idea, whatever that idea is, and compare it. How does it correlate with you know, hyperspectral imagery or this kind of imagery or soil sampling or whatever. That might be an agronomy application, or it could be a grain marketing thing. How does that correlate? So you have resources like this available now to really go a long ways down the path of exploring that idea and maybe turning it into a company before you have to invest a serious amount of money. And just on the smart farm topic too, there's any farm can become a smart farm. That's one of the big things that most of these startup companies are searching for, is a farm that will help them validate. So just a little proof point here, like if you look at the trend line of the money that's coming into agri-food investing, it's on a big growth curve. It's been on a steady growth curve for a long time, but in recent years it's really going up. And this is from Ag Funder. Yellow is basically upstream from the farm, blue is downstream from the farm, where the investment's going. And those are big numbers. Those are billions, 19 billion and 32 billion. I think I lost one of my, I lost a slide somewhere in there, but it was just another, I think it was from Pitch Deck or somebody that had a similar graph to this, just showing the amount of investment moving in. Another key point here is just the cross section. So agri-food has become very relevant to a lot of other key industries. So I got the wrong presentation here. That's why I'm not seeing what I'm looking for. Anyways, the fintech, which means an insurtech. So that's think about farmers in past years have 2 or 3 generations of land equity. Your bank wants to talk to you because they can leverage your operating line against that land equity. As a farm grows very quickly, either with renting more land or else recently buying more land, that equity ratio is not good for a bank anymore. They don't know how to lend you money on an operating line. So that's where there's a big opportunity. Just one example, InsurTech, you've heard about global ag risk insurance. So there's these kind of things. Clean tech is how do you reduce emissions, and there might be a lot of alternative fuel ideas in there. Supply chain logistics, there's lots of tech. That's a whole, what you call an industry vertical that has a lot of financing in it and everything else. That is looking at agri-food as the next big opportunity where they think they can make a difference. So the other one that was not on here is the energy tech. So I went to the hydrogen conference in Edmonton, I think it was last April, and blown away. And what about the size of the hydrogen opportunity that we have here in this province. And but one of the key things I noticed was the crossover with agriculture. There's so much of it, like when we say the hydrogen economy, that includes ammonia. There's ammonia infrastructure in every little one-dog prairie town across North America. There's pipelines, there's train cars. So when we talk about hydrogen, as that includes ammonia, that becomes very, very relevant. When you also think that ammonia is not only just a fertilizer, that's how we tend to think about it, but it's also a fuel. A very good fuel, and it can be used in tractors and trucks and every other thing. So probably a lot better opportunity there than electric power for your tractor or your highway trucks. So lots of crossover between the different industries right now. So that's the one I wanted right there. Anyways, the farm of the future is going to look different. We all know that. There's a lot of change happening. My presentation today was supposed to be about emerging value streams. So there's a lot of emerging value streams that'll come with emission reduction credits and all these different types of things. But I think the value stream that I want to leave you with, that's the most important one, is I think that everybody in this room could be an entrepreneur, solve a problem. How much money is there in solving that problem? And there's lots of resources to help you with that. And so that's where I think through the rest of the day here, 2 days, just think about it through that lens. Can I help solve one of these big challenges and make it into a company? And if so, I think there's an opportunity. That's a whole new value stream that lets you to continue what you're doing, either farming or working in agribusiness, and also doing a side hustle. So anyways, that was all I wanted to leave you with here today. So.
Yeah, it is. Thanks a lot, Chris. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Just let me shake your hand. Are there any questions for Chris before he steps away?
Well, I'll be around here all afternoon too, so got one over here.
Yeah.
The question was, are we starting to see curtailing of the investment into ag tech? It's a very good question. The capital markets overall, doesn't really matter what type of investment capital, started to kind of recoil around Christmas time last year. By about March or April, it was almost a total freeze up. So if you were a company trying to raise capital, it was suddenly very difficult. The investors were kind of frozen, saying, hey, how is this war in Ukraine going to impact us, and is the post-COVID rebound as good as we thought it might be? There's logistics disruptions, so a whole bunch of things kind of converged, and the capital markets froze up. So now that was bad news for a lot of early stage companies. But the good news on that is that AgriFood is by far the most resilient portfolio out of any industry sector. Food scarcity, food security, those are looming issues that are just as big. Emission reductions is a major priority, so everybody knows that. So the investment has continued quite well. I wouldn't say it's on the same steep curve as we were looking at in late 2021, where it was almost vertical. It's plateaued, but if you look at most of like the pure tech that I saw in Silicon Valley, or a whole bunch, pharmaceutical and stuff like that, it was the investment has just really frozen. So those graphs point straight down right now. If you're a good company with a good idea, there's still lots of money flying in agri-food right now. It hasn't slowed down that much at all, and it's in fact it's accelerating again. It kind of plateaued for about 4 or 5 months. So
it's great. Any other questions for Chris? Well, again, big round of applause for Chris. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time today. And Chris will be around, so he can help answer any of your questions. Interestingly enough, Chris, when I was 2009, I wanted to start up take some image recognition software to identify weeds, and I went through all the research, got there, but then didn't fit with Farms.com, and I couldn't find any financing. So the world has changed a lot, so great opportunity for people now to get involved with that. So thanks again, Chris.